Hello, and welcome back to Ask the Trade Pros. It's your favorite show where a couple of trade guys talk, and sometimes about trade stuff. We're here to answer your questions about your HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and any other home system so that you can help keep your home running smooth. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Todd.
Today, we've got a question from a loyal listener, Kate. She says, I moved to Arizona from Wisconsin about 6 months ago, and I am used to having to do a lot to winterize my home in Wisconsin every year. But the weather in Tucson is a lot milder. What do I actually need to do to get ready for winter, and what do I need not to worry about, aside from throwing out my winter clothes?
Well, Kate, that's a good question. The climate here is obviously very different from where you came from, so it might be tempting to not worry about winterizing anything at all. But we will go over some of the basics that you should probably do here during the winter. First and foremost, as everyone knows, the temperatures here don't get as cold, obviously, as they do in Wisconsin. But there are some days that we still need heat. So I would make sure your heater's working. Do you have a gas or electric furnace? That matters as well. But you do want to make sure that your heater is functioning. I would probably check that. I don't know, Jordan, what do you suggest? End of October, November? It's not even really cold then.
Yeah, again, it's like we talk about pre-season checkups. So it's getting warmer every year out here where we are. So our winter, we were at 100 degrees last October. We do need it to be a little bit cold out here to check units versus some other parts of the country, so we might not have the weather. So we generally I'd say October, later October, maybe early November. It's very important you get a check. Like we just said, pre-season, I get a lot of customers here because our winters are so mild. They don't do anything until that 1 week when we actually get cold weather, and then they haven't checked anything and it doesn't work. So I'd recommend the pre-season check. Like you said, Todd, it's a little bit different if they have a gas furnace versus a heat pump. There's a slightly different checkup procedure you're going to do for one. That's up to the professional you hire to come out. Obviously, Kate, you're probably not doing that checkup yourself. Gas is a little more thorough in that they're going to check for carbon monoxide and other dangerous gases coming off the furnace when it's operating. So that's a very important part of your furnace check. Heat pump's a little bit different. They're just going to make sure that it operates properly, that all the functions and all the systems engage it into the heat mode.
Yeah, if you have any gas appliance in your house, always make sure that you have carbon monoxide detectors and they are functional. So most of them have test buttons. When your HVAC tech comes out to check if you do have a gas furnace, he's going to have a digital meter that's going to read carbon monoxide and be able to tell you, if at all, if you have any parts per million of that. We've covered HVAC. Let's move into the next big thing that people are concerned about, plumbing.
So we have a lot of exposed pipes here in Tucson, and as we just talked about, it doesn't get cold a lot. So people tend to neglect it and forget about it until the one time that it gets cold. We had, at this point, it's probably a few years back, they had a freeze warning for a whole week in Tucson, which is not normal for us. And there was a run on insulation for pipes. People had forgotten about it so much that when they needed to go do it, they didn't even have it in stock because we had so little insulation around here.
Yeah, I remember that week. It was like every day, first thing in the morning, right when it starts thawing out or warming up a little bit, the phone would be ringing like crazy. Pipes bursting, a lot of evaporator cooler lines because it's only 1/4 inch or sometimes 1/2 inch copper bursting. I think we even had a few 3/4 inch water lines on people's waterizers that were cracking as well.
Yeah, so it can happen here. So tell them a little bit, Todd, about how somebody would go about winterizing that part of their house here, because we neglect that. As we just said, we just forget about it until we get a water explosion.
There is obviously different options with brands and quality of the pipe wrap. So there's Armaflex, which is more rubbery. There's foam insulation. They have just the fiberglass insulation as well. So whatever product you choose to use, you also got to remember that that's going to remain there for the rest of the year. So not only do you need to think about winter, but you need to think about the sun that we have here in the summer as well. So,
summarizing your winterizing?
Yeah. So you need to summarize your pipe wrap. And with that being said, what we're talking about here, we're laughing, but it is true. You need to UV protect that insulation, whatever you put on there. So UV protection can be 10 mil tape,
20 mil tape,
20 mil tape, whatever protection. You could even paint it if you want. That's still
UV resistant paints. We have a lot of flat white slate roofs here, so you elastomeric if it runs over the roof. Pipings are running over the roof. You want to make sure it's a thick enough insulation. Some people make that mistake. They put the cheapest, thinnest one on there. It doesn't do anything. It won't hold up. It's just not durable enough. So you use a good heavy quality pipe insulation with, like Todd said, summarized with UV protection of some sort. And that goes on after the fact. Now, it's not going to guarantee it. So one of the things you need to do, we're talking about winterizing. After you've done this the first year and you know that every inch of your pipe is covered and every exposed part, you want to check it every year, even if you've done it already, because our summer does eat through things, our storms, our sun, occasionally creatures. And you just want to visually walk all that exposed pipe in your house, whether it's on the roof and you have a professional do it if you can't get up there, or what we call the riser that comes out of the ground, or hose bibs, or other exposed areas that are exposed to the cold air.
Yeah, and Jordan mentioned that a lot of houses here have pipes ran exterior, sometimes on the roof. So if we're going to have an abnormal amount of below freezing mornings or days, I would also recommend probably just putting your hose bib on a small drip, because water that's running obviously is going to take longer to freeze than...
Well, it's a river versus a lake, right? Rivers don't freeze as much as lakes do. Moving water keeps it from freezing over.
There you go. So regarding plumbing, that's pretty much it. Pipes.
Yeah,
wrap 'em.
some people here have, it depends on what your house has. Some people have external tankless water heaters. Most of the newer ones do have a heat protection built into them, but there is an issue sometimes there if you have an externally mounted water heater.
Yeah, like you said, that I think all the newer ones have freeze protection built in heaters, ceramic heaters that will heat that up. Yeah, so after the plumbing, another thing that you might want to do is just do a roof and an exterior inspection. Sometimes here we could have high gust of winds depending on what area of town you live in. If you have shingles or tile roof, you just want to do an inspection and see if you have any broken or missing tiles. You know, we do have a lot of heavy snow here, so that can really wreak havoc on your roof. Obviously, that was a joke. Jordan's still laughing about it. That's how funny it was.
You know, sand, snow, it's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I thought sand and snow was the same.
It is for us out here. So we do have a problem in Tucson here, actually, the winterizing, when Todd was talking about the roofs and other stuff, is you have to be cognizant of freeze damage. Since we freeze so rarely, if you get ice on what Todd was talking about, shingles and the gaps and the spaces, stuff like that, ice expands and causes bigger cracks, whether it's on your white coat roof or your shingles. And we don't normally look for that because we don't have winter. So that's another thing you want to pay attention to, damages that might be caused to your roof when we have that cold weather.
Yeah, and regarding electrical, I would say this. So we don't really, again, our winters are mild. So I wouldn't be largely concerned with electrical. I will say this, though. If you don't have a furnace or a heat pump for heat, you better do an electrical inspection if you plan on using a space heater. Space heaters they require high amps, and a lot of times the wiring and circuits, especially in older homes, cannot handle the amp draw of those space heaters. So every year we see melted outlets, wires burned, and sometimes even fires. So if you do plan on using space heaters for heat during the winter, I would always have an electrical inspection done and possibly consider running dedicated circuits where you plan on using those to protect yourself and your family.
One of the other things, Kate, we can talk about here is our outdoor plants. Now, that's a little bit outside of the range that the trade pros usually cover, but because most of our plants aren't designed for the winter, they don't go into a winter mode. So if you're from Wisconsin, the trees, the bushes, everything like that is ready for snow, kind of sets itself into winter mode. Our plants do not. So if you're winterizing your home on those coldest days, you're going to get recommendations to cover your plants. It's just putting essentially a bag or some sort of plastic or cloth over them to hold the heat into them, keep them warm on those cold days. But you'll see plenty of news about that on the weather station, and all that seems to love to tell you to protect your plants. Otherwise, they're going to get freezer burn and cold burn, and then they'll die on you.
Well, Kate, I hope you got some good information from everything we talked about. I think we covered the basics. So what I would recommend is this. Find a local trusted trade pro is a number one priority. That way, if you do have any of these problems during the winter, you could have them resolved and you'll be okay.
Thank you for listening to Ask the Trade Pros. We release new episodes every other Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a question you would like us to answer on the show, please leave us a voicemail or an email, and we may feature your question in an upcoming episode. That information is in the show notes. This podcast is sponsored by the good folks at Done Right Services. As always, thank you for your support.